A Course in Miracles, a transcription of the Shorthand Notes manuscripts of Helen Schucman, draft of the text volume. Uh, that's that's what I'm reading from. The new emphasis will now be on healing. The miracle is the means, the atonement the principle, and the healing is the result. Those who speak of, quote, the miracle of healing, unquote, are combining two orders of reality inappropriately. Healing is not a miracle. The atonement, or the final miracle, is extremely useful. It is purely a means, while any type of healing is a result. I mean, the goal is to live Jesus like, perfect peace, joy, strength in terms of the emotions, about everything, every thought, word, and action. Perfect peace, joy, strength, calmness, tranquility. That's the goal. So healing, um, you know, gets someone there. Healing gets someone, healing the mind is what this book is all about. So healing gets someone there, but that's not living timelessly. Living timelessly in eternity is living in perfect peace, joy, strength, no conflicts of thought, no doubts, no uncertainty about everything, every moment, moment to moment, physical behavior, thoughts, words, actions, beliefs, all of it. So the atonement, at one minute. There's a sense in the book about, atonement. It combines up a few of those ideas like atonement, enlightenment, salvation, a couple other ideas, a couple other words that are similar to all that. It's simply oneness with God from a metaphorical standpoint, not literally in the sense of not being an individual. Anyone is an individual, and the goal is for anyone's individual mind to be sinless, pure, and holy in ACIM terms. It's the same thing as moral, virtuous, righteous. That's the goal for any individual human mind. And then you are like God, is the ACIM teaching. Um, Reading from the Notes of Helen Schucman, ACIM, as we noted yesterday, the atonement is the remedy. The word remedy is in capital letters. The order of error to which it is applied is irrelevant. Essentially, all healing is the release from fear, but to undertake this, you cannot be fearful yourself. um, so, um, the book talks about this is an individual curriculum in the sense that the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of God within each and every human being on earth, the Spirit of God within man, is working with that particular person individually in terms of their particular spiritual growth and how to go about it. So, as far as what is an error, and there is a truth and there is an error to absolutely everything. Every physical behavior, there's a right and a wrong. ACIM says in the teacher's manual, the mind can be right or wrong. It's simply a fact. So, um, to every physical behavior, every spiritual belief, every belief about anything, there is a right and there is a wrong. So if I'm in the right, I'm in perfect peace, perfect joy, perfect tranquility, no anxiety, no resentments, no angers, etc., etc. Um, and that's what it's talking about. I mean, there's a sentence in the book: any seeming happiness that does not last was actually fear. So, so this has a lot to do with body pleasures where it seems like it's going to be happiness, but then I feel remorse. Well, then it was a fear thing to begin with, and you cannot live that behavior and grow spiritually and live up to what ACIM is talking about, living up to what reality is about, what the only goal is to live perfectly in terms of God's will for anyone, whether that's consciously, someone's consciously aware of it or not. But um, So yeah, any seeming happiness that does not last was actually an ego thing, and you have to stop the behavior and stop the belief about the behavior, change the belief about the behavior, change, understand the truth about whatever the problem is in terms of feeling remorse, understand the truth about that particular aspect to life and be happy about that. Live in the real truth about whatever the physical behavior is so that you're in perfect peace, perfect joy, perfect strength every moment, moment to moment. Lots and lots of sentences in ACM about that. Joy is eternal. Joy does not come and go. Joy, we're supposed to be in joy, peace, strength, goodness every moment, moment to moment. That's our capital S self in ACIM terms. So which area of life somebody works on is determined by them and the spirit of God within them. So, all healing is the release from fear. So fear, an uncomfortable emotion. I like that simple definition for fear, an uncomfortable emotion. So any uncomfortable emotion is your ego. It's not spiritual growth. It's not growth towards what real enlightenment is. There should never, ever, not for one moment, be an uncomfortable emotion. Ever, not for one moment. It's fear, whatever it is, whatever the subject is about body appetite, body behaviors, spiritual beliefs. I mean, there's a sentence in the book. It says, idols are also um, um, false impressions. An idol can be a false impression, meaning a false belief, meaning an idea that's just not correct. But it's an idol, meaning that it's an ego thing. It's not perfect peace, perfect joy, perfect strength, perfect happiness, perfect goodness, perfect kindness, perfect tenderness. It has negative emotions in it, and therefore it's not the actual will of God. The will of God is always perfect peace, joy, strength, etc. So, reading from the notes of Helen Schucman, ACIM, you do not understand healing because of your own fear. I have been hinting throughout, and once stated very directly, that you must heal others. The reason is that their healing merely witnesses or attests to yours. So, ACIM talks about your brother a tremendous amount. Your brother is every human being on earth at any given moment. So, everything is about relationship. You, I, anyone is always in relationship to every human being on earth in any given moment, and God, and angels, whatever someone's uh, sense of that is. But that's the truth: is that nothing is about yourself. Zero selfishness. The book talks about selfishness in terms of having no selfishness of any kind. So everything is about relationship in terms of oneness with others from a, um, you know, um, in a metaphoric sense, not literally, not not uh, not 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 having your individuality. That's not the truth. You, I, and anyone is an individual mind, spirit. You're not a body because you're not taking it with you, but everyone is an individual mind, spirit, and that's going to continue on into the afterlife. So it's about perfectly healing our individual minds. Um, so everything is about getting together with others and sharing and helping others in any way possible, helping yourself in any way possible. Um, that's what reality is about relationship with others. Eternally, reality, life is about relationship with others, whether it's relationship with God or every and any human being on earth. Life is always about relationships. Lots and lots of sentences in this book about that fact. Um, there's a sense in the book like relationships are not used by you at all. They are used by the Holy Spirit, and that's what keeps them pure. So never think that you, I, or anyone is doing anything in any relationship of any kind, any interaction with anyone to any degree in any way is never about what you alone are doing. It's always about what you're doing with the Holy Spirit, what you're doing in the will of God. That's always the case about everything, moment to moment. That's Jesus in his public mission. That's how he lived. Um, so, and the only way to get to what real perfection is to be very serviceable to others, very active with others. You know, Jesus himself, Jesus prior to his baptism was very social, very active with others. Plenty of sentences in the Urantia book, Urantia, about Jesus, how he loved others. There's a sentence in the book about, you know, even as a teenager, like 17, 18 years old, Jesus had developed that ability to love people. And the sentence in the Urantia book says, just common folk, just common folk. So it's all about, loving others from what a real perspective of what that is. Love, the dictionary definition: an intense feeling of deep affection with gentle fondness and liking, gentleness being mild, kind, and tender in temperament and action. So um, uh, that's what has to be developed in terms of, for real. Like, that has to be developed in terms of every moment to moment, about how you are, how I am, or how anyone is. Um, um, if real gentleness, tenderness, kindness, no hard driven behavior is another phrase in this book, but if that can be fully developed, then I, you, or anyone will simply know what to do in the next moment in terms of true, perfect gentleness, kindness, um, 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 gentleness, kindness, simplicity, um, but really knowing what that is about anything: speech, word, action, moment to moment, knowing what that is, and then living in that and being happy about living in that. And then there's nothing else going on except perfect joy, peace, strength, kindness, tenderness, every moment to moment, in your own mind and life and in your interaction with others. There's nothing else present. Reading from the Notes of Helen Schucman, ACIM: a major step in the atonement plan is to undo error at all levels. Illness, which is really not right-mindedness, is the result of level confusion, in the sense that it always entails the misbelief, that what is amiss in one level can adversely affect another. Um, so there's only two levels. I mean, ACIM does say this, like all levels, and there's more than one sentence in the book about this, about the levels. I believe there is a sentence in the book that more or less says that, the two levels are the physical level and the spiritual level. To me, that's the two levels. There's nothing else about it. Um, so what I want to undo error here at the physical level and live as a spirit being right now in a physical body. Live as a perfect spirit being would live. That's the goal. So, um, like Jesus in the Urantia book, he would be talking to James, one of the apostles, and James, and the Urantia book says James grasped the idea that, um, live in the kingdom now, live in the kingdom right now, in terms of living similar to Jesus and his public mission, living Jesus like in terms of peace, joy, strength, goodness about everything, every moment to moment, in every way. Um, um, live that way right now as a human being walking the earth plane. There's another sentence in ACIM about, you can use your body best by, um, uh, teaching others that they are not a body. There's a sentence like that in the book. I'm paraphrasing some there. So, um, at all levels, just, as far as, mentally undoing all errors, which will lead to proper, correct physical behavior, proper, correct physical words, if the mind has no errors in it in terms of beliefs. Uh, level confusion in the sense that it always entails the misbelief that what is amiss in one level can adversely affect another. I don't know. Um, Reading from the notes of Helen Schucman, we have constantly referred to miracles as the means of correcting level confusion. In reality, all mistakes must be corrected at the level at which they occur. Only the mind is capable of error. The body can act erroneously, but this is only because it has responded to misthought. The body cannot create, and belief that it can, a fundamental error responsible for most of the fallacies already referred to, produces all physical symptoms. Um, I mean, there's certainly sentences in the book about not switching from one ego behavior to another, expecting that ego behavior to be peace, joy, and strength. If the ego behavior was remorse, doubt, fear, disappointment, anxiety, etc., resentment, anger, etc., if that's what the ego behavior was, trying it a different way will not make it peace, joy, strength. There are sentences in the book about that. Um, so mistakes have to be corrected at the level at which they occur. So um, incorrect thinking for me, you, or anyone, incorrect thinking, ego thoughts have to be corrected here and now as we're living. Um, Certainly, they can be corrected after this lifetime in whatever takes place there. But um, um, really, what ACIM is saying, there's other sentences in the book about um, be born again. So um, me, you, or anyone from being a baby, a small child, a preteen, a teenager, into our 20s. Um, I, you, or anyone made beliefs that are not the perfect will of God. They're not perfect peace, joy, strength. So those are the beliefs that have to be undone. So the book talks about, to me, it talks about go back to those times. Think about being born again in terms of that which was not the will of God, and that is anything that's not perfect peace, joy, strength, goodness, love, kindness, joy, anything that's not that was not the will of God. Therefore, it doesn't exist because it's not the will of God. So it doesn't exist. Technically speaking, it doesn't exist at all because it's not the will of God. So look at it that way. Like go back to times when I was, a small child, preteen, teenager. Look at those events that took place that were not perfect peace, joy, strength, and understand that they don't really exist. Forgive those times completely. Forgive myself, forgive others if necessary about it, but forgiveness is always for yourself. But there's sentences in the book about that. But forgive myself, forgive yourself for um, anything that was not perfect peace, joy, strength, and then you can forget it. You won't remember it anymore. If you truly forgive those things that were not perfect peace, joy, strength, you'll forget about them. They won't be something that you think about in the present moment. So be born again. Go back to that time period and think about those moments where it was not perfect peace, joy, strength, and forgive yourself and let it go and understand that it's didn't actually occur in a sense because it was not God's will. So only God's will actually exists in real truth. So this is the ACIM idea and ideas. Um, so I mean, there are sentences in the book about um, this one here. The body can act erroneously, but this is only because it has responded to misthought. So bad behavior, physically doing things which result in remorse, disappointment, sorrow, or some other negative emotion, or saying things that result in resentment, anger, disappointment, whatever, all of it, negative emotions of any kind. And that phrase is in the book twice about it uses that phrase negative emotions once, and it also uses a phrase similar one time in the book. But throughout the entire book, at some point, it lists out most of the negative emotions. The book actually doesn't use the word remorse. The only time it uses the word regret is to say not regretting the past. There's a phrase like that in ACIM. But other negative emotions like sorrow, anxiety, things of this nature, um, at one point or another throughout ACIM, A Course in Miracles, those negative emotions are listed. And it says, the book talks about not having those negative emotions. They're not the will of God. Um, okay, so it's starting to talk about actual physical illness. That's a whole nother subject. I mean, to me, the goal is, no mental upsets, perfect mental health, mental healing in terms of peace, joy, strength about everything, moment to moment. So someone who's living that way, they cannot get physically sick. It simply cannot happen. If you're truly living in the will of God in terms of proper, correct beliefs about everything, you cannot get sick in any way. That's a truth. That's an ACIM. But it does talk a lot about physical illness, and there's a lot in the book about the subject. Anyway, ACIM, reading from that, all physical illness represents a belief in magic. The whole distortion which created magic rested on the belief that there is a creative ability in matter which can control the mind. This fallacy can work either way. That is, it can be misbelieved either that the mind can miscreate in the body or that the body can miscreate in the mind. Um, so, um, so the body is wholly neutral. There's a lesson in the book that says my body is a wholly neutral thing, and then it's an entire lesson talking about that subject. So the goal is to feel my body, your body, anybody's body, as far as bodies are concerned, to feel them, see them, view them, think about them 100% neutrally. Dictionary definition of what neutral is. So that's the goal, is to see my body, your body, anybody's body, everybody seeing anybody else's body 100% neutrally. So that's the goal. That's an ACIM. There's the word neutral about the body is in there 3 or 4 times, maybe something like that, and that's what it's saying. Um, to me, ACIM, when it starts talking about magic, it's just talking about ego beliefs. Um, there's a lot in the book about physical illness and what's going on there, and there's a lot in the book about the subject. But the one of the main ideas simply is that the mind is doing everything. The mind is the creator, controller of everything. So the mind is doing everything, thinking everything. The body is merely following through with what the mind wants. No matter what the body does, it's following through with what the mind wants, period. So that includes ideas about, not being a victim at all in any way whatsoever. Other ideas similar. Reading from the notes of Helen Schucman, ACIM, if it can be made clear that the mind, which is the only level of creation, cannot create beyond itself, then neither confusion need occur. So the body, ACIM, more than once, plenty of times, the book talks about the body does not create anything. It's always the mind that is doing the creating. But just simply understanding that idea and everything about it. The notes of Helen Schucman, ACIM, reading from that. Ugh. The reason why only the mind can create is more obvious than may be immediately apparent. The soul has been created. The body is a learning device for the mind. Learning devices are not lessons in themselves. Their purpose is merely to facilitate the thinking of the learner. The most that a faulty use of a learning device can do is to fail to facilitate. It does not have the power in itself to introduce actual learning errors. So, ACIM, I, you, or anyone, our perfect selves is always present in our minds. At the center of our minds is how ACIM puts it, at least once. And more than that actually. So, at the center of a human's individual mind, at the center of that mind is the God mind, where the perfect self is in terms of beliefs, the will of God beliefs, the God mind. So um, that's who our perfect self is. We have to let go, undo all the ego negative mental energy and transform that back into the God mind is one way of expressing it. But lots and lots of sentences in ACM about this topic. But the goal is to live in nothing but the will of God in terms of God beliefs about everything, moment to moment. And that's where perfect peace, joy, strength, tranquility, etc., etc., are in terms of living every moment, moment to moment. So the body does not do anything in terms of doing anything. The body, I mean, there's plenty of ideas about that in ACIM. Reading from ACIM, the body, if properly understood, shares the invulnerability of the atonement to two-edged application. This is not because the body is a miracle, but because it is not inherently open to misinterpretation. The body is merely a fact. Its abilities can be, and frequently are, overevaluated. However, it is almost impossible to deny its existence. Those who do are engaging in a particularly unworthy form of denial. The use of the word unworthy here implies simply that it is not necessary to protect the mind by denying the unmindful. There is little doubt that the mind can miscreate if one denies this unfortunate aspect of its power. One is also denying the power itself. So, in service to God, the body can be a temple. That's also in this book. The body can be a healthy, useful instrument, which is utilized in terms of service to others. And then at the end of one's life, it's simply laid aside and you move on to whatever the afterlife is. There are sentences like that in this book. So, so and it's very important not to deny the body, not to deny being in a body, not to deny physicality, not to say that physicality does not exist and things of this nature. Non-dualism is completely incorrect. Non-dualism is completely incorrect as a philosophy, as a theory. It can be talked about in terms of the big picture of, hundreds of billions, hundreds of trillions of years from now. It can be talked about, but uh, it's absolutely essential here and now to not deny the reality of the physical body, the physical world. That's what the book is saying here. In that particular sense, it really, this may be the only place in the book where it says it, but it's very important. There's a lot of sentences that sort of kind of allude to the idea that physicality doesn't exist. Lots and lots of sentences like that, but that's that's a metaphor, or it's not how real truth should be understood. So, to deny the body is engaging in a particularly unworthy form of denial. So, for real peace, joy, strength, Jesus-like way of thinking and living and being. Um, do not deny the body in any way, in terms of thought, word, action. Uh, but there's big picture understanding to all of that. So it is not necessary to protect the mind by denying the body. Um, All right, reading from the Notes of Helen Schucman, ACIM. All material means which man accepts as remedies for bodily ills are simply restatements of magic principles. It was the first level of the error to believe that the body created its own illness. Thereafter, it is a second misstep to attempt to heal it through non-creative agents. It does not follow, however, that the application of these very weak corrective devices are evil. Sometimes the illness has sufficiently great a hold over an individual's mind to render him inaccessible to atonement. In this case, one may be wise to utilize a compromise approach to mind and body in which something from the outside is temporarily given healing belief. This is because the last thing that can help the non-right minded or the sick is an increase in fear. They are already in a fear weakened state. If they are inappropriately exposed to a straight and undiluted miracle, they may be precipitated into panic. This is particularly likely to occur when upside down perception has induced the belief that miracles are frightening. So, here early on in the book, ACIM is kind to the whole medical field, hospitals, doctors. There's a, it may be wise to utilize a compromise approach to mind and body in terms of, so I mean, so you know, there is physical realities to healing in terms of, penicillin heals syphilis. Penicillin heals syphilis. So if someone does not heal their syphilis, um, they could go blind and whatever. I mean, so penicillin heals syphilis. So that's a truth. So um, but it's all about living in a mentality where you or anyone simply has nothing to do with any type of physical illness of any kind. Not no colds, no coughs, no nothing. Um, not even like the slightest cough, ever, like moment to moment. That's living our real selves, our capital S selves, our God selves, etc. Um, so yeah, so I mean, this is a growth process. I mean, certainly ACIM talks about the growth process. I mean, in theory, somebody could be Jesus like in a moment, in an instant. The book says that, but then the book also talks about the growth process in an overall sense, and that's why it's a book. There's different sections of this book, supplements, the text, the workbook, the manual for teachers, there's two supplements. There's actually three supplements. Another supplement called Gifts of God. So there's a lot of information about these topics in different ways over and over again to really truly understand the overall idea. Um, there's a sentence in a book about, do not fear that your spiritual growth you will suddenly be, I'm going to use the word catapulted, but that's not the word in ACIM, but that you will suddenly be thrown into Jesus-like perfection in terms of your life. No, it doesn't work that way. So don't worry about being suddenly thrown into Jesus-like perfect way of living. It just doesn't work that way. So there's a sense, I'm paraphrasing, there's a sense in the book like that. Um, so upside down perception, believing the opposite of the truth. Um, there's a truth to everything. And if I believe in the opposite of that, I'm going to be angry. I'm going to be defensive. I'm going to be upside down in terms of, um, you know, and if I act on that which is not true in truth and God's will, I'm going to have remorse, disappointment, sorrow,